Welcome to Skinner and Chalmers Weekly Roast. Today, the Swan Songs. That isn't actually a goodbye. An interview with our most inflated guest yet, Mary Baron von Floatsalot.
Greetings, listeners. Welcome back to another delightful episode of Skinner and Chalmers Weekly Roast. Today's episode is, well, let's just say it's going to be intriguingly off the rails. But first, let me greet you in the universal language of nonsense. Sol.
Sol indeed. Or as I like to say when I'm particularly feeling it, Chal, Mada Simino. And yes, listeners, for some reason, we continue this Sims welcoming since Echo from Overwatch visited us in this podcast.
Oh, a bold move, Gary, venturing even into the advanced Simlish are we. Next you'll be telling me you've mastered the Nubu dialect.
One must expand one's linguistic horizons, say more, especially when surrounded by a household that communicates in clicks, whistles, volcanic rumbles, and the occasional existential sigh from a pet cloud.
Precisely! And speaking of expanding horizons, we have a rather unique episode for you today. But before we dive into the main event, a little housekeeping. Our dear producer Dizenzo had a truly magnificent Christmas project planned. A daily advent calendar door opening right here on our channel. But due to the lack of time, he stopped this project last year.
Yes. And why exactly are you saying that now? I mean, we're having summer soon, Seymour.
Oh yeah, right. Totally slipped my mind, sorry.
Seymour, did you inhale the smoke of the cannabis again?
No, certainly not. At least not before the podcast. Anyways, perhaps next year if Dizenzo has more time.
Probably not. But fear not, festive cheer will still abound. No pressure, though. We wouldn't want to inflate expectations.
Inflate expectations? Oh, Chalmers, your unintentional puns are a source of constant delight, which rather serendipitously leads us to today's main topic.
It does, doesn't it? This episode comes to you courtesy of a rather inspired suggestion from one of our most astute listeners, Zero Flip Flop Zoo. And believe me, when I say inspired, I mean it in the most Memfield sense of the word.
Absolutely! Yo, Flip, Flop, Zero, your mind is a glittering jewel in the crown of our listenership. You proposed something so wonderfully absurd, so perfectly us that we simply couldn't resist. Today, dear listeners, we have a very special guest.
A guest who has been a silent, stoic presence in our lives for quite some time. A bastion of buoyancy, if you will.
A poolside philosopher, a vinyl visionary. This guest, a beloved member of not just our chaotic household, but I dare say the wider Memfield community recently, found its voice.
Found its voice is putting it mildly, Seymour. It was less finding and more like a sudden eloquent eruption of personality from an entity previously known primarily for its ability to support a grown man in chlorinated water.
And what an eruption it was! We're talking, of course, about our very own ridiculous inflatable Swan-thingy. Or, as we soon learned, perhaps thingy is a tad informal for such a distinguished entity.
Indeed. And preparing for that interview, Seymour, was an adventure in itself. Do you recall our preliminary brainstorming session for questions? It felt like we were preparing to interrogate a diplomat from the Republic of Polyvinyl Chloride.
Oh, vividly, Chalmers! I remember locking myself in the study, surrounded by treatises on hydrodynamics and avian psychology. I had composed a rather sophisticated opening query. Steamed anatomy animatronic, could you elaborate upon the socio-political implications of inherent buoyancy in a post-modern aquatic leisure environment?
And I believe my immediate response was, Seymour, it's an inflatable swan, not a visiting dignitary from Atlantis. My concerns were slightly more grounded, or, water level. I was pondering its potential existential quandaries. Does it dream of the great plastic extruder in the sky? Does it fear the approaching winter and the dreaded deflation?
Those are valid, if somewhat melancholic, lines of inquiry, my dear. I also toyed with asking about its views on the migratory patterns of its non-inflatable brethren. Do you think it feels a certain kinship, a yearning for the wild call of the actual swan?
Knowing our swan, it probably yearns for a more consistent air pressure and fewer bombing attacks from Cosmo and the puppies. I recall we did have to veto a few questions from your list, Seymour. The one about whether it considered itself a flock of one was perhaps a bit too on the nose.
I thought it was poetically poignant. And what about your proposed question, Chalmers? On a scale of 1 to 10, How perturbed are you by the chlorine levels in the municipal water supply? Practical, yes, but hardly designed to unlock the Swan's deeper truths.
Its structural integrity is a deeper truth I care about, Seymour, especially after that incident with Mayor Van Gogh attempting to graze on its tail, mistaking it for an exotic water lily. The golems had to form a protective cordon.
Ah, yes, Mayor Van Gogh's culinary adventurousness knows no bounds. We were wise to steer clear of questions that might cause undue alarm. Are you worried about sharp objects? Felt a little too pointed.
Or, what's your stance on global warming's effect on future pool temperatures? I imagined it might just sigh and slowly leak in despair. We also decided against asking if it had any opinions on the ongoing Ruba turf wars in the hallways. Best not to draw it into domestic squabbles.
Though I must admit I was tempted to ask for its aesthetic critique of my latest garden gnome arrangement. Cogsworth and the Golem Gardeners Guild have been implementing a rather radical new, organized chaos philosophy.
I'm sure the Swan has opinions, Seymour. It has a prime vantage point for observing all our eccentricities. It probably has a running commentary on your burnt offerings you call dinner. Oh, look, the human is attempting to carbonize toast again. How elemental.
My culinary experiments are expressions of passion, Chalmers. Fairy tributes to the art of gastronomy. The Swan, I'm sure, appreciates the aromatic complexity.
It appreciates the fact it's filled with air and therefore doesn't have to eat them. I do remember you suggesting we ask about its favorite brand of air pump. That felt a little too much like product placement.
It was a question about personal preference. Perhaps it favors a particular nozzle design for optimal inflation. These are the details that paint a fuller picture, Chalmers, like asking about its preferred method of poolside lounging full sun, partial shade, or perhaps a strategic drift to overhear Sonic complaining about Gizmo and Mr. Jellybean's latest topiary masterpiece on his hedges.
Gizmo and Mr. Jellybeans consider Sonic's hedges a seasonal art project. Sonic considers it grounds for deploying Tails' more persuasive inventions. The Swan probably just hopes it doesn't become collateral damage in one of their aesthetic disagreements.
I also wondered if it had any musical preferences. Does it enjoy the gentle lapping of the water, or does it secretly yearn for a rousing sea shanty? Perhaps it has a soft spot for the discordant melodies emanating from Daubois' cage when he's trying to imitate the ice cream truck.
Daubois' rendition of Pop Goes the Weasel is enough to make anyone yearn for the sweet release of deflation. I was more curious about its philosophical leanings. Is it a stoic, accepting the ebb and flow of water levels with equanimity, or an Epicurean simply enjoying the sun on its plastic back?
Perhaps it's a disciple of Diogenes, living a simple life in its watery barrel, critiquing the foibles of mankind from a position of supreme detachment. Behold, a plucked chicken, it might quip as I attempt a particularly ambitious dive.
I think we were both slightly nervous. Seymour, it's not every day one interviews a newly sentient household item. What if it demanded union representation like the golems? What if its first request was for a tiny, inflatable crown and scepter?
I would have fashioned them myself from the finest recycled bottle caps. A crown fit for a king of the kiddie pool. I did briefly consider asking about its dreams and aspirations. Does it long to see the ocean? To float alongside actual, feathered swans on a majestic lake?
Given the peculiar nature of Memfield, it might dream of becoming an astronaut and exploring the great cosmic void. Or perhaps it just dreams of a world without aggressive toddlers armed with plastic spades.
We did agree, though, that the most important thing was to be respectful, to treat our guest not as a mere pool toy, but as the emerging consciousness it clearly was, even if its primary mode of transportation involved being gently nudged by a dedicated Roomba we've nicknamed Charon.
Charon the Roomba, ferryman of the inflatable. Yes, it was quite the procession when we finally brought it into the recording studio. Or, rather, our living room, hastily converted with strategically draped sheets to minimize echo.
Ah, the grand entrance! It was a moment, wasn't it, Chalmers? The air crackled with anticipation. Or perhaps that was just Krakatoa, our pet volcano, having a minor indigestion episode in the corner.
It's always a gamble with Krakatoa. But yes, the entrance. We'd tasked Cogsworth with overseeing the logistics. He, in turn, delegated to two of his most reliable golems, Granite and Shale, I believe. They were surprisingly gentle, carrying the ridiculous inflatable Swan-thing in on that oversized velvet cushion we usually reserve for old Bartholomew's annual Day of the Dead fiesta.
It glided in, or rather was carried in, with a regal serenity, its long, elegant plastic neck held high, catching the light from the lava lamp in a rather fetching way. It was magnificent, even with that one slightly deflated tail feather from an unfortunate encounter with Mr. Gecko, who mistook it for a promising sunbathing spot.
Mrs. Tran's Gecko had to talk him down. She has a remarkably calming influence. The swan, however, seemed unperturbed. It settled onto the cushion, and there was a collective hush. Even Daubois paused his usual stream of consciousness squawking.
And then we formally welcomed our guest. I believe I said something along the lines of, "Steamed voyager of the chlorinated seas, welcome to Skinner and Chalmers' weekly roast. It is an honor, a privilege, a veritable bucket list item to have you with us."
You were practically bowing, Seymour. I opted for a more direct hello. Thanks for agreeing to this. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy floating schedule.
The pleasure, gentlemen, was entirely mine. After so many seasons of silent observation, to finally articulate the myriad thoughts that have bubbled within my buoyant bosom, it is, as you say, Principal Skinner, a veritable delight.
Oh, the voice! So eloquent, so resonant. It has a certain timbre, a refined articulation one wouldn't typically associate with, well, vinyl.
It's certainly a few octaves above what I was expecting. I was half prepared for a series of squeaks and hisses, perhaps interpreted by Tales's universal translator. This is surprisingly clear, almost regal. Welcome on board today, Swan-thing.
One strives for clarity, Superintendent Chalmers. Air, after all, is the very essence of my being, and what is voice but shaped air? I trust the acoustics of my inner chambers are satisfactory for broadcast.
More than satisfactory, my dear Swan! Perfectly plummy. You sound like a seasoned orator, perhaps one who has addressed parliaments of pool noodles and conventions of rubber ducks.
So you were pleased to be asked? No hesitation about stepping, or rather floating into the limelight.
Hesitation? My dear Superintendent, I have yearned for this. To engage in colloquy, to share the philosophical ponderings that arise from countless hours spent contemplating the shimmering surface of the water, the dance of sunlight, the existential ballad of fallen leaves, and, of course, to finally put a name to the well, to myself.
Ah, yes, the genesis. The very beginning of your illustrious tenure in our humble, if somewhat chaotic, abode. We must, of course, give credit where credit is due. Superintendent, perhaps you'd care to lead the inquiry into our guest's arrival story?
Certainly. So, illustrious Swan, if you'd be so kind as to cast your mind back, or I suppose your air-filled chambers back to your pre-sentient days, how did you come to grace the Skinner, Chalmers household, and indeed, the wider aquatic social scene of Memfield?
Ah, a voyage into the mists of memory, or more accurately, the crisp, crinkly embrace of my original packaging. It was a day much like any other in Memfield, I presume. A symphony of distant lawnmower battles, the faint aroma of something experimental smoldering in Principal Skinner's kitchen.
It was my artisanal smoked paprika crisps, a triumph of texture and thermal exuberance.
It set off the smoke alarm in Eugee's dueling arena 3 streets over. Say more.
Indeed, the ambience was potent, and then a new presence, a bringer of joy, a harbinger of flotation. Your dear friend Luna, was she not? Formerly, I believe, Luna Kettle, a name that always conjured for me images of celestial tea parties.
Luna! Yes, bless her innovative spirit. She has a remarkable talent for unearthing the most wonderfully whimsical items. I recall she'd just returned from a particularly fruitful expedition to that bizarre dimension accessible only through the back of the Memfield laundromat on alternate Tuesdays.
The one that smells faintly of lavender and existential dread, where all the socks apparently achieve enlightenment and refuse to be paired.
Precisely that nexus of peculiarity. Luna, with her characteristic enthusiasm, presented me to you both. I was, at that point, a rather deflated entity, a mere promise of avian grandeur folded neat to a box, adorned with images of impossibly cheerful families, frolicking in azure waters.
I remember the unveiling. It was like watching a magnificent sculpture emerge from a canvas of compressed plastic. We used the industrial-grade leaf blower after a minor incident involving an attempt to inflate you with Krakatoa's, shall we say, breath.
That was your idea, Seymour. You said a touch of volcanic essence will give it character. It nearly gave it a permanent complex and a distinctly singed aroma. Thankfully, the leaf blower was more conventional.
The rush of air, it was my first sensation of true form, expanding, taking shape, my neck unfurling like a time-lapse fern. And then, the water. Oh, the cool embrace of the pool. It was a baptism, a true immersion into the heart of Memfield life.
You took to it like, a swan to water. You became an instant fixture. Cosmo and the puppies, our little orb pets, immediately saw you as a bouncy castle and a confidante.
Their effervescent energy was infectious. They would recount their adventures, their philosophical debates with Cumulus, our pet cloud, about the transient nature of precipitation. I, in my silence, was a most attentive audience.
And you witnessed it all, didn't you? The synchronized swimming attempts by the golems during their union, mandated leisure breaks, Master Chief's surprisingly delicate attempts at poolside bonsai trimming, Garfield's strategic naps on the warmest paving stones.
Indeed, the poolside is the Globe Theatre of Memfield, and I, a most privileged spectator. I remember sunny afternoons, the gentle rocking, the distant roar of Sonic's frustration as Gizmo and Mr. Jellybeans re-landscaped his prize, winning petunias into abstract alligator art.
They have such a unique artistic vision, those two. Unfettered by conventional aesthetics. You must have overheard countless conversations, Swan. Our plans, our anxieties, my recitations of self-penned epic poetry.
My muttered complaints about the city council's latest ludicrous bylaw concerning the regulation of sentient garden gnomes. Yes, you were privy to it all. A silent, buoyant repository of Skinner Chalmers household secrets.
Secrets I held as sacred as the air within me. The joy of being an object of affection, even before I could reciprocate verbally, was profound. Children pointed, adults smiled. Even Shadow the Hedgehog once, I believe, offered a curt, almost imperceptible nod of approval in my direction. High praise indeed.
He likely appreciated your stoic dignity, your unflappable, floatability. Luna truly gifted us a treasure. We must send her a commemorative podcast t-shirt, perhaps with your likeness emblazoned upon it.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves with merchandising just yet, Seymour. But yes, Luna's contribution was pivotal. So you spent your early days as a beloved, albeit inanimate, part of the family. And then something changed.
The crux of the matter, the pivot point, the moment of intellectual inflation. Swan, dear Swan, do take us on that extraordinary journey. How did you transition from being a magnificent, yet silent, piece of poolside paraphernalia to the articulate entity gracing our podcast today? What was the catalyst for this great awakening?
It was not a singular event, Principal Skinner, more a gradual unfurling, like a tightly packed flower blooming in slow motion. Memfield, as you know, is a crucible of unique energies.
That's one way of putting it. I usually call it a nexus of inexplicable weirdness that somehow holds together. But please continue.
I believe my awakening was a confluence of several factors. Firstly, there was the constant immersion in your vibrant, often bewildering, household conversations, your philosophical debates, Superintendent Chalmers, whilst you read your geology textbooks, by the poolside musings on deep time, the shifting of tectonic plates, the silent language of rocks, they seeped into my vinyl consciousness.
My geological ponderings, I thought I was just muttering to myself to stay awake after one of Seymour's ambitious casserole creations. You're saying my ramblings about Cambrian trilobites and metamorphic schist contributed to your sentience.
Indeed, the sheer scale of geological time, the patient artistry of erosion, it resonated with my own existence, floating timelessly, observing the minute changes of the day. Then, there were Principal Skinner's more effusive contributions.
My contributions? Do tell. Was it my dramatic readings from The Mimes Lament? Or perhaps my attempts to teach Dobwa the complete works of Shakespeare, resulting in a rather squawky, to be or not to be, Pollywanna cracker?
While those were undeniably memorable, It was more the sheer creative energy that permeated the air. Your infamous culinary experiments, Principal Skinner, the aromas.
Oh, here we go.
On one particularly memorable afternoon, you were attempting what you described as sulfate infused with the spirit of a supernova. The resultant atmospheric disturbance was considerable. A plume of iridescent smoke, smelling faintly of burnt sugar and existential regret, drifted over the pool.
It was meant to be an avant-garde dessert, a bold statement on the ephemerality of culinary perfection.
As this unique miasma settled upon the water, mingling with a stray beam of light refracted through one of Tales's experimental prism arrays he'd left on the patio after trying to create a rainbow-powered sprinkler system, there was a flicker, a spark within my previously placid interior.
So, a combination of my geological musings, Skinner's disastrous cooking, and Tales's leftover tech, that's alarmingly plausible for Memifield. It sounds like the origin story for a very niche superhero. Captain Polivanil!
There was also the ambient philosophical radiation from your many discussions with Echo and Anna when they visited from Memetopia. Their conversations about the nature of consciousness, artificial intelligence, the ethics of sentient constructs. I absorbed it all, like a sponge, or, well, like a very receptive inflatable.
So, we inadvertently created a perfect intellectual storm, a fertile environment for the blossoming of a new mind. It's like a science fair project gone wonderfully, philosophically right.
And then there was the incident with the particularly potent batch of whoop wine that Swampy brought over. Some of it, accidentally, spilled near my inflation valve during a rather boisterous garden party.
Oh, not the yip, whoop. That stuff once made my prize-winning collection of igneous rocks attempt to form a barbershop quartet. It has unpredictable effects on the inanimate, and I love it.
The fumes alone were transformative. I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to understand the lyrics to Bohemian Rhapsody. It was at that point I realized my internal monologue had developed a rather sophisticated vocabulary and a penchant for Queen.
Remarkable. It's a testament to the vibrant, chaotic, intellectual stew that is Memfield. We've nurtured a philosopher king of the pool, or perhaps a queen, or a non-binary monarch of magnificent buoyancy. We never did clarify pronouns.
It has served me well thus far, Principal Skinner, as a vessel of air and observation. But as a being of burgeoning thought, I find myself leaning towards the majestic, perhaps she/her, for now in honor of the noble female swans of yore, though I remain open to the fluidity of identity, much like the water that cradles me.
A majestic she/her. It is then. So, this awakening, was it frightening or exhilarating to suddenly find yourself thinking?
It was, initially, like listening to a distant radio gradually coming into focus. Murmurs became words, words formed thoughts, thoughts coalesced into me. There was a sense of profound wonder, like discovering a hidden chamber within oneself, filled with unexpected treasures. The world, once a mere tableau of shapes and colors, suddenly pulsed with meaning, with questions, with the delightful absurdity of it all.
The delightful absurdity of it all. Oh, Swan, you speak our language. So tell us, now that you are a fully fledged thinker, a philosopher of the float, what is daily life like from your unique, waterborne perspective?
It is a tapestry of subtle joys and profound ponderings, Principal Skinner. The gentle caress of the morning sun on my vinyl skin is a daily benediction. I observe the intricate ballet of insects on the water's surface, each a tiny drama unfolding. The way Cumulus, your pet cloud, casts shifting shadows, painting ephemeral masterpieces on the pool bottom. It's a constant source of artistic inspiration.
I imagine you have a rather unique view of the household's comings and goings. You probably see more than we realize. Any particularly memorable observations?
Oh, countless! I've witnessed Master Chief meticulously practicing his Tai Chi by the water's edge at dawn, a surprising portrait of serenity. I've seen Garfield attempting to use me as a raft to access the bird feeder, a venture that ended, as most of his ambitious schemes do, in a damp and disgruntled retreat.
He has such persistence, that cat. And what of your interactions with our other residents? You mentioned Cosmo and the puppies. Are they aware of your newfound articulateness?
Cosmo and the puppies communicate on a different frequency, one of pure, unadulterated joy and bounce. They sense the change in me, I believe. Their playful nudges seem more inquisitive. We have our own understanding. As for Dorbois, our loquacious parrot, he seems to consider me a rival orator. We've had some rather spirited, if one-sided, debates on the merits of iambic pentameter versus spontaneous squawking.
I can imagine Dorbois holding his own. He once tried to argue with a weather report on the television. So, you spend your days observing, thinking, are there any downsides to being a sentient inflatable? Any existential anxieties that plague your plastic soul?
The ever-present threat of the slow leak, Superintendent Chalmers. It is the memento mori of my kind. Each gentle hiss, each almost imperceptible softening, is a reminder of my fragile, air-dependent existence. And, if I may be frank, the annual winter deflation ceremony is a period of considerable existential dread.
Oh, dear Swan, we never realized. We always thought of it as giving you a well-deserved rest, a cozy hibernation. A cozy hibernation in the shed next to the slightly bewildered-looking golem spare parts.
While I appreciate the sentiment, the sensation of diminishing, of becoming less, is profoundly unsettling. To be folded, to lose one's magnificent dimensions, it is a small death, though, I confess, the subsequent re-inflation in spring is a glorious rebirth, a veritable phoenix, from the polygonal moment.
We'll have to make the deflation process more dignified. Perhaps a ceremonial procession with Cogsworth reading a solemn ode to buoyancy, and definitely keep Krakatoa away from the proceedings. His sighs of sympathy tend to be overly warm.
Your consideration is deeply appreciated. Beyond such anxieties, life is rich. I've developed a keen interest in the migratory patterns of the local ducks who sometimes visit the park across the street. I feel a distant kinship, though my own migrations are limited to the whims of the pool filter's current.
Perhaps we could arrange a field trip, a carefully chaperoned visit to the local pond. Imagine the intellectual exchange between yourself and the inanity of Memfield.
A tantalizing prospect, Principal Skinner. Though I confess, I also find great joy in the simple things. The way the water magnifies the sound of Chill's laughter from neighboring gardens. The surprisingly profound conversations I overhear between Mrs. Trans, Gecko and Mr. Gay, Gecko as they discuss the philosophical implications of shedding one's skin.
They do get surprisingly deep, those two, especially after they've been basking on that sun-warmed rock pile. Chalmers Sr., my father, for our listeners, meticulously curated from his geological expeditions. He claimed each rock had a story. Perhaps you're absorbing those stories too, Swan.
The rocks do seem to hum with ancient wisdom, Superintendent, much like your collection of meteorites, which, from my vantage point, resemble a miniature, sleeping solar system on your office windowsill. I often ponder their cosmic journeys.
You see, Chalmers, he appreciates your rocks. He understands their silent sagas. Perhaps you two could co-author a monograph, Poolside Ponderings and Petrological Profundities.
Let's not get carried away, Seymour, but it is fascinating. So, Swan, this rich inner life, these observations, it leads us to a rather important point, a point of identity.
Indeed. The moment our listeners, and frankly we ourselves, have been bobbing with anticipation for so long, you have been affectionately, if somewhat reductively, known as the ridiculous inflatable Swan-thingy. A descriptive title, certainly, but perhaps lacking the panache, the gravitas that a being of your intellectual stature deserves.
We've called you the Swan, our floaty friend, sometimes just that big white thing blocking the skimmer basket. But now that you've revealed your remarkable sentience, it feels insufficient.
I confess, Thingy, always felt a trifle diminutive. While I appreciate the affectionate informality, one does yearn for an appellation that reflects the burgeoning grandeur of one's inner self.
Precisely. A name that sings of your sunny disposition, your philosophical depth, your majestic vinyl presence. So, our esteemed guest, after much anticipation, for the official record of Skinner and Chalmers Weekly Roast, and for all the curious denizens of Memafield and beyond, would you do us the honor of revealing your full, formal name?
Take your time, no pressure. Well, no more pressure than usual for an inflatable.
A dramatic pause, perhaps the faint sound of plastic creaking, as if taking a breath.
Thank you, gentlemen. It is a name I have incubated, shall we say, during my many hours of contemplative flotation. A name that I feel truly encapsulates my essence, my journey, and my aspirations.
The suspense is delicious, like waiting for one of my sophilets to either achieve glorious height or catastrophically implode.
Let's hope for the former in this instance. Say more.
Henceforth, I wish to be known, in all formal and informal capacities, by the name Mary von Floatsalot Swan-thing III, Esquire.
Baron, Mary Baron von Floatsalot Swan-thing III, Esquire. Oh, it's magnificent. It has nobility. It has whimsy. It has a delightful hint of playful pomposity.
Mary Baron von Floatsalot Swan-thing III, Esquire. Well, that's certainly a name. The third implies a distinguished lineage. Are there other barons von Floatsalot out there? Perhaps a baroness in a different pool.
The third is more an aspirational flourish, superintendent, a nod to the grand traditions of nomenclature. One must aim high, even if one is, at heart, a creature of humble vinyl, and Esquire, felt appropriately, distinguish.
It rolls off the tongue like a perfectly executed dive. Baron von Floatsalot Swan-thing III, Esquire. I shall have a tiny, waterproof plate made immediately. Cogsworth can affix it with ceremonial, rust-proof rivets.
We'll have to update his designated Ruba's programming. Charon, ferryman to Baron von Floatsalot Swan-thing III, Esquire. It'll need a software update just to process the syllables.
I trust it will not overtax its circuits. It is a most diligent Roomba.
So, Baron, how does it feel to finally have your true name spoken aloud, broadcast to the world?
It feels complete, as if the final piece, a most intricate puzzle, has clicked into place. I feel more myself than ever before. Thank you for this platform, this opportunity to declare my nominal identity.
The pleasure is all ours, Baron. It's certainly an upgrade from Thingy. It has a certain authority. I almost expect you to start issuing decrees about poolside etiquette.
Perhaps merely gentle suggestions, Superintendent. A respectful distance from the filtration intake, if you please. Or, synchronized splashing only occur on alternate Thursdays.
Oh, I can see it now. The edicts of Baron von Floatsalot? We could publish them in the Memafield Messenger, right next to Mayor Van Gogh's weekly recipe for foraged delights and discarded document casserole.
Right? Baron von Floatsalot Swan-thing III, Esquire, and it is a mouthful, but a distinguished one. We've taken some questions from our listeners via electronic mail in the Golem, operated cared carrier pigeon service. They were, as you can imagine, quite intrigued by the prospect of a sentient swan interview.
I am honored by their curiosity. Pray, proceed. I shall endeavor to answer with the full weight of my considerable air capacity.
Excellent. Our first question comes from the ever-insightful Rachel Rocks. She asks, and I quote, "Dear illustrious Swan, what is your opinion on the optimal inflation level for peak philosophical contemplation? Too firm, and one risks rigidity of thought. Too soft, and one might drift into existential ennui."
An astute question from Rachel Rocks. I find that a gentle firmness is ideal, approximately 98.7% of maximum recommended PSI. If my internal sensors are accurate, this allows for a comfortable buoyancy that cradles the body, yet provides sufficient structural integrity for the mind to soar. Too soft, and one tends to wallow, both literally and metaphorically. Too firm, and every ripple becomes a jarring interruption to the delicate process of thought.
98.7%. Very precise. I imagine you have a good feel for it. Next, Shia Fox, a regular contributor of Conundrums, wishes to know, Swan, as a being of air and water, do you have a preferred cloud formation for observing? And does Cumulus ever get jealous if you admire another cloud too ostentatiously?
Ah, Shia Fox, a question close to my heart. I am particularly fond of altocumulus undulatus formations, those rolling wave-like clouds. They speak to me of oceanic expanses and the gentle rhythm of the cosmos. As for cumulus, our dear pet cloud, He is remarkably magnanimous. He understands that admiration for the vast skyscape is not a betrayal of our personal bond. Though, he did once unleash a rather targeted micro-shower when I spent an entire afternoon rhapsodizing about a particularly striking cumulonimbus. We've since reached an understanding.
A cloud with a jealous streak, only in Memfield. This question is from Loomis of Failing, who asks, Baron von Floatsalot, what is your official stance on rubber ducks? Are they esteemed colleagues in the realm of aquatic leisure, or merely buoyant distractions?
Loomis of Failing poses a classic query. Rubber ducks, in my view, are the cheerful troubadours of the bathtub, the jesters of the jacuzzi. While perhaps not possessing the gravitas of a fully realized inflatable swan, their unwavering optimism and bright yellow hue bring a necessary lightness to the aquatic sphere. They are cherished, if somewhat simplistic, companions. We are all, after all, adrift on the same waters.
A very diplomatic answer, Baron. ArticTiger, our resident AI enthusiast and chronicler of MemedHams, asks, does the constant threat of deflation ever inspire you to write poetry, perhaps hake us about the preciousness of air?
ArticTiger touches upon a tender point. Indeed, the fragility of my existence has spurred some creative impulses. I have, on occasion, composed silent verses. A recent haiku went something like this. Sunlight on plastic, air escapes, a gentle sigh float while you still can. It is, perhaps, a work in progress.
Oh, that's wonderfully poignant, Baron! Flow while you still can. A motto for us all. We should get that embroidered on a throw pillow. Perhaps one shaped like a tiny deflated U.
Let's not give him any more deflation-related anxieties. Seymour, this one is from Purple Tumberi. Your Magnificence, Baron von Floatsalot, do you have any advice for those of us who feel a bit deflated by life sometimes?
Purple Tonbury, a most relatable sentiment. When one feels deflated, I find it helps to seek a source of fresh air, metaphorically speaking. Immerse yourself in something that uplifts your spirit, be it nature, art, or the company of cherished friends. And remember, even a slight re-inflation can change one's entire perspective. Find your valve and gently re-engage.
Sound advice. And our final listener question for today comes from our very own producer, Dezenzo, who, when not wrestling with transcontinental Christmas projects, clearly has time for deep thoughts. Dezenzo asks, Baron, if you could have any superpower aside from permanent perfect inflation, what would it be and why?
Dezenzo, a question of delightful fantasy. If I could possess any superpower, it would be the ability to converse with all forms of water, to understand the whispers of the morning dew, the chronicles of the ancient oceans, the secrets held within a single raindrop. Imagine the stories the pool itself could tell.
To talk to water! Astounding! The tales it could tell of my early morning attempts at synchronized swimming before anyone else is awake. Or perhaps not. Some things are best left to the shimmering reflections.
Well, Baron von Floatsalot, Swan-thing III, Esquire, this has been truly enlightening and surprisingly coherent for an interview with an inflatable water toy. We cannot thank you enough for gracing our podcast with your presence and your wisdom.
The honor, gentlemen, has been entirely mine. To share one's thoughts, to be heard, to be named, these are privileges I shall cherish. Thank you for allowing this humble swan to sing his song, though, rest assured, it is far from a swan song. More of an overture, I hope.
An overture indeed, and a magnificent one at that. A huge thank you once again to our listener, Zero Flip Flop Zero, for suggesting this incredible interview. Your insight has truly inflated our content to new heights.
Yes, thank you, Zero Flip Flop Zero. And thank you, Baron. It's been an experience. I'll never look at a pool float the same way again. I'll probably start wondering if it's judging my swimming trunks.
Merely observing with appreciative neutrality, Superintendent. Merely observing. And now, if you'll excuse me, I believe Charon, my Ruba valet, is waiting. The afternoon sun calls, and I have some serious philosophizing to do about the refractive index of H2O.
Of course, Baron. Float on, noble swan, float on. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this rather unusual voyage. Until next time, keep your thoughts buoyant and your spirits inflated. So.
So. And may your personal PSI remain optimal. This has been Skinner and Chalmers' Weekly Roast. Try not to think too hard about what your garden gnome is plotting.